E17 down. He'll push 100. I was too excited, man. Then I saw the eye guards. He's a shooter, man. You got to shoot him.
Does anybody have their spotting soon?
I'm really enjoying myself. It's not exactly the weather you might think.
He had the wind, he had the range, he had a rest, and you could comfortably and easily squeeze that trigger.
It's like standing on a basketball court with Michael Jordan, Magic Johnson, and Larry Bird. This is what it's like to be in the shadow of greatness.
Once you've hunted Coues deer, they will forever haunt your soul. Jack O'Connor considered the Coues deer the most difficult of all deer species to harvest. And it's an amazing quote, and it's so true. Once you've hunted Coues deer, they will forever haunt your soul, in a good way. They get deep inside you. Some days you're amazed by them, some days you're totally frustrated by them. But ultimately, once you've hunted Coues deer, you'll want to do it again. As the largest Coues deer outfitter in the country, I had a lot of apprehension when a few of my lead guides asked me and invited me to go down to Mexico in Sonora to partner with them on a Coues deer hunting operation. I joked with my wife saying, I think I'm going to book this trip down there to Mexico and I'm going to pay full price. And she said, why would the largest Coues deer outfitter in the world pay full price to go on a Coues deer hunt? We laughed about it a little bit, but I said, if I'm going to partner up with Pat and George on a property in Sonora, I have to go there as a client first. I have to see what the flora and fauna is like. I have to see what crossing the border's like. I have to check all those boxes as a client before I could partner with them on the business. Man, oh man, am I glad I did. A lot of people have apprehension, myself included, about what it would be like to cross the Mexican border with firearms. I can tell you, the organization and the preparation logistically we do to get your firearms across the border is second to none. You always have somebody with you from our operation, and the process is easy so long as you've done your paperwork correctly. But you know what? If you don't want to take your firearms, I promise you, we have plenty of Husqvarna scopes in camp. A lot of my Coues deer clients come from the Midwest, and believe it or not, they become some of my most frequent repeat customers. Why? Because these are folks that have eastern whitetails in their backyard that they can shoot off their porch. And that's precisely why I tell them, you've got to come hunt with me in Arizona or Sonora. You can't shoot these off their porch. Hunting a Coues whitetail deer, properly pronounced cows by the way, is more like a sheep hunt in the sense that it's high point glassing, looking for a mature buck, and then making a stalk that could get you within 100 yards, but may not allow you to get even closer than 600 or 700 yards. It's the perfect combination of both. Not only that, but once you've seen a Coues deer up close, you will be amazed by how dainty and small they are, but yet how incredibly tough they have to be to live in the Sonoran Desert, one of the most inhospitable climates in all of the world. There's no doubt about it. Once you've pursued Coues deer, you'll be in love with them like we are, and your first hunt most likely won't be your last. I'm going to ask you a question right now. How many white-tailed deer species do you think there are in North America? Now get a number in your head. It's 39. I'm guessing most of you thought 7, 8, maybe 10. There are 39 white-tailed deer species just in North America alone. And the Coues deer is slowly but surely becoming one of the most desired. Maybe it's because tags are so attainable. Over the counter in Mexico, guaranteed to hunt with me in Arizona the first year I put you in a guaranteed Coues deer draw. Maybe it's the overall thrill of hunting like what Jack O'Connor called it, a poor man's sheep hunt, where you hunt almost essentially the same way as you do sheep. High points, big optics, and glass. Maybe it's because of the variety of seasons you can hunt them from August to January, from the velvet, pre-rut to the peak of the rut. Maybe it's because of the satisfaction of getting prepared in the months before your hunt just to be able to see and glass and hunt these amazing deer. Maybe you just want to learn how to become better behind your own optics, because if you can glass a Coues deer, I promise you can glass any animal on any continent around the world. The Coues deer itself may be one of the most overlooked big game species in North America. Only occupying Arizona, a small portion of New Mexico, and northern Old Mexico, the Coues deer range is very small, very limited, which I think leads to some of the lack of hunting interest. However, over the years, shows like this that you're watching today, word of mouth, but also the Coues deer being recognized as a required species for certain slams, has made the Coues deer one of the most desired trophies today in North America. Hopefully after watching this episode, you'll be interested too. Once again, once they're in your heart, they're in your soul for life. Other reasons my clients tell me Coues deer hunting is so popular is because of its affordability. And while it's real money and everybody only has so many resources, to think you can hunt Coues deer for less than $5,000, in some cases $2,000 and $3,000, really make a guided hunt affordable to hunters who may not normally be able to afford to do a guided hunt. If you're somebody who's passionate about shooting and want to test yourself at long distances, a Coues deer is going to give you that opportunity. When a client asks me, Dan, how far should I be able to shoot? I often tell them it would be great if you were comfortable out to 4, even 500 yards. And while it's my job as a guide to get you as close as you need to be, for my very prolific shooters, it's not uncommon for them to be able to take a Coues buck at 600, 700 yards, and as you'll see in today's episode, even beyond.
The Best of the West is brought to you by the Wild Sheep Foundation, Cryptek Camo, Hawkins Precision, Polestar Outdoors, Hornady, accurate, deadly, dependable, Huskama Optics, and LongRangeStore.com.
In one of my first years with the Best of the West, I was able to share a horseback camp with John Porter and Ed Cochran in southern Arizona, and we had a blast. And it was so much fun and meant a lot to me to be able to swap stories with one of the best sheep hunters in the world with one of the largest Coues operators in the world. We had a blast, we had some long-range shots. John himself said, "These are amazing animals. I don't know how you guys glass these up and find them." And I knew then that John Porter and I would be doing a lot of Coues deer hunts together in the future.
Well, we're finally out here on this Coues deer hunt with the infamous Dan Adler. And I'll keep asking him here. We've been sitting here for maybe 10 minutes we've been glassing. And I'm hoping that he's gonna show me a Coues deer so I know what they look like. And maybe I'll be able to spot one, but we'll see. You gonna show me one? I'm gonna find one for you right now. Well, I hope so.
Racket.
Where did it hit?
Back.
Huh?
Back. I think I called it
You see
before.
the right
it
of
got
the tree?
there.
I think you did. I think that was a gooder one. Wow. Whew. Laid there for a while on that one.
Way to go, John. What a shot, man.
Yeah, man. Well, we laid here for, I don't know, 2 hours.
Yep, about 2 hours. Coues deer time.
Yep, waiting for this deer to get up, just bedded up there looking around. The birds are messing with him, and he finally just decided to get up, I guess.
Yeah.
That was a bit of a poke there.
Yeah, 9:20 in the morning. Glassed him up a couple hours ago, almost 700 yards. True Coues deer hunt. I mean, you glass them up at long range. You know, you take your time, get set up. John did an awesome job. We all know what a good shooter he is. Found that deer, and I think we laid him down, brother. I think we laid him down. Way to go, man. Got the deal done. That left-handed shot, we just couldn't get the angle, and John, being the proficient marksman he is, he was able to get himself positioned for a left-handed shot at just about 690 yards. I mean, you got to get out there and practice with your equipment, but by golly, it works when you do it right. Great job. Way to go, my friend.
Thanks, bud. Well, you know, that left-handed shooting is something that I practice a little bit just so that I can do it. It's not natural for me, especially laying in a 90-degree position there like that, but you know, I practice it enough to where, you know, I can make it happen.
Yep.
And I'd sure recommend anybody to practice that a little bit. And the key to it is, it's never going to feel comfortable. You just got to get in a position, get your gun properly supported front end, back end, which I had really good support on both ends. I have to really watch my cant when I shoot left-handed because it's very unnatural for me. So I had to keep raising my head, looking at my level. My level's on the wrong side for a left-handed shot, but you know, we kept looking at that, and so made it work anyways.
Well,
and,
your practice and training paid off. I mean, an old warrior, cut up ears, great rack, you know, great age class. I mean, everything you want in a Coues deer. Just a really, really fine piece of work. Great shooting.
These are just a beautiful little animal, aren't they?
They are. I mean, obviously I'm biased, but I think they're the most beautiful of the North American deer species. They're dainty, they're delicate, but yet they live in one of the harshest places in the world.
I like that delicate little face on them.
Both Ed and John took incredible Coues deer bucks at long range. I was so glad to be able to share it with our audience, and I was so glad personally to have a camp with them. It won't be the last one. When you think of Mexico, you probably think of sunshine and beaches, and you wouldn't be wrong. But we weren't greeted by that at all our first day in Sonora. It was rainy, a little bit of ice, and there was dense fog. It really didn't seem like we were in Mexico, didn't even seem like we were in Arizona. But we knew because it was the rut, because it was January, if we stayed with it, there was a chance of finding a slammer buck on day one. Well, you wouldn't know it from the weather, but we're Coues deer hunting during the rut in Sonora, Mexico with Pat and George. So good to be here. This is a long time in the coming. Been wanting to expand the business down here for a long time. And the weather doesn't look like it today with the wind and the rain, but it actually gives us really good glassing opportunities because in theory, most of the bigger bucks are going to be on this leeward side staying out of the wind. So since we're in these big canyons and draws, it eliminates about 50% of the glassing, allowing you to focus on the leeward side. So stay tuned. It should be a great day and a great week. A lot of my clients ask me, you know, if you've been guiding Coues deer for nearly 2 decades, you must have an incredible trophy room. And I laugh and tell them, my clients do, but until this episode, I had never killed a buck over 100 inches myself. Times are a-changin'. When it comes to hunting Coues deer, it's an optics, optics, optics hunt. You'll often see me with big glass on a tripod, and I'll never go anywhere without my Husqvarna 10x42s around my neck. Oftentimes, you're not even looking for a deer in the brush. You're looking for the twitch of an ear, the sun glistening off the tip of an antler, maybe the flagging of the tail. Even though it's the rut and bucks are on their feet more, the reality is a Coues deer is called the gray ghost of the desert for a reason. There is no such thing as a free lunch when it comes to hunting Coues deer, and that's another aspect that makes them so rewarding to hunt. After a very easy border crossing in the morning of day one, we were greeted to a wonderful lunch in town, and then all the excitement was building up to our arrival at the ranch. When we got there, I don't think we spent more than 20 minutes throwing down our gear, putting on our packs, because we wanted to see the woods. We didn't see any shooter bucks that afternoon, but we got a really good lay of the land. You could see how beautiful it was, and despite some pretty nasty weather with the prospects for it to get worse over the next couple days, we still saw a few bucks that got our excitement and our aspirations and our hopes up for the next day. Mexico doesn't disappoint, even in the rain. Chris Ledoux sings one of my favorite songs of all time called "This Cowboy's Hat," and he talks about how his cowboy hat is tattered, torn, and stained with sweat. The same could be said with my Best of the West 300 win. Over the years, you've watched it go around the world with me, different continents, different countries, different places, and different cultures. And every year I think this is the year I'm going to call the shop in Cody and tell them, hey guys, it's time to send me something new and updated. Just like Chris Ledoux's cowboy hat, I can't let go of this rifle. Now it's here in Mexico with me, doing the dirty work in the rain. No rust, no problems, just accuracy, pinpoint shooting, time after time. I may never give up this rifle, and Chris Ledoux will have never given up his hat.
For more information about the products and gear used in today's show, please visit longrangestore.com or call 1-866-754-7618. The Best of the West is brought to you by the Wild Sheep Foundation, Cryptek Camo, Hawkins Precision, Defiance Custom Actions, Hornady, accurate, deadly, dependable, Huskama Optics, and LongRangeStore.com.
At dinner on day one, everybody at the ranch said tomorrow's going to be a bad day. The weather's really rolling in. And me being the perpetual optimist, I said, no way. This is Mexico. Tomorrow's going to be beautiful and sunny. Well, guess who was right? The locals. It was a dismal day. The cloud depth dropped to nearly the mountains, and you couldn't see very far. There was an opportunity to even just give up and say we're not even going out today, but there was no way with 5.5 days of hunting we were going to take the opportunity to stay in the ranch house. So off we went in the rain and the ice and the muck, and it was just a lousy day. But you know what? We got to glassing spots. We were still able to find some deer.
It doesn't matter where in the world hunting, you gotta have great optics. I don't like to go anywhere.
With George and with Aguilar and said, you know, what are we looking for today? On a day like this, what are we looking for? Are we scouting? Are we hunting? What are we doing? And they said, no, the rut's on. Anything could happen anytime. Yeah, the weather's lousy, but we're not going to give it up. They said, as far as the buck you're looking for, you as a Coues deer guide know yourself. You'll know it the moment you glass it up. So here we are up in the mountains, high vantage point, great spot to glass, looking for hundreds of yards on the first ridge and up to about a mile on the second ridge. And we're seeing a little bit of activity, but it was pretty slow due to the weather. And we got the idea that if we hadn't seen any shooters by about 1 o'clock, we'd get out of the nasty weather, give us a chance to dry out our clothes, dry out our optics, and just drive a little bit around the property. So here we go back in the side-by-side, down some really steep stuff, almost like being on a roller coaster. Up the backside, beautiful ranch. Every corner you turn is something new, something glassable, And I remember constantly asking George that second day, is this all still the ranch, or are we looking at other people's properties at this point? And they said, no, if you can see it, we're still on the ranch. And it's incredibly how vast this place is. And to be hunting private property that isolated from other human beings and hunters is truly an incredible experience. We made our way down a really tight switchback, and as we came around the corner to the left, George was real emphatic. We're going to glass every single one of these fingers, because even though they're 400 to 700 yards away, with our optics, we'll be able to pick up that movement, and there's usually a shooter buck in one of these ridges. First ridge, glassed, nothing but ice and rain. Second ridge, we glassed, nothing but ice and rain. The third ridge, I picked up my Husqvarna 10x42s, and I went, whoa, there's a buck, and he's a good buck. And George says, where is he? And I talk him in, and I just keep saying it's a good buck. But on this ranch, I want to make sure they think it's a good buck too. But remember, they had told me, as a guide, you're going to know when you're seeing a good buck or a great buck, and I felt like this was a great buck. And I could only see the back of his frame walking away with the doe. I talked George in very calmly. We're sitting there in the side-by-side, ice and rain coming down. And finally, George got an eyeball lock on this buck, and he just turns, get your gear, get your gun, get your gun, get your pack. This is the buck you're going to shoot, and you're going to shoot it now. First ridge, last, nothing but ice and rain. Second ridge, we glassed, nothing but ice and rain. The third ridge, I picked up my Husqvarna 10x42s, and I went, whoa, there's a buck, and he's a good buck. And George says, where is he? And I talk him in, and I just keep saying it's a good buck. And finally, George got an eyeball lock on this buck, and he just turns, get your gear, get your gun, get your gun, get your pack. This is the buck you're going to shoot, and you're going to shoot it now. So as fast as I could, I grabbed my backpack, my Husqvarna tripod, my Flatline Ops rear bag, and my earmuffs, because I couldn't find my foamies. And onto the wet ground I went. The first thing I did was give my guide my rangefinder. Give me range. 47 yards. Try again. 52 yards. Try again. 48 yards. The wind, the rain, and the ice were not allowing us to pick up our target, even with our high-end optics. And finally, I said, use mine. He had the same problem for a couple clicks, and then the skies parted, just gave us a little window, and George was able to say, 507. I said, shoot it again. 506. I said, range it again. 505, then 506. Range is confirmed, 15-mile-an-hour wind, 505 yards, broadside in the rain and snow in Sonora. So one of the dynamics of not just hunting, but hunting for TV is you've got to be in sync with your videographer. And here's George saying, 505 yards, we got to shoot now. The buck was able to wind us, and he's chasing a doe. So talk about the ultimate rush, the ultimate adrenaline. The moment is happening now. George says, as soon as you've got a shot, as soon as you've got a shot. And I just kept checking with George. 500 yards, double check the range. T, are you on it? Are we ready to go? And finally that buck turned broadside, was watching his doe go over a hill, and George says, it's now or never. I gently squeezed the trigger on my 300 Win Mag, and I was able to see that bullet hit its mark through my Husqvarna 5x30. Buck one down. So growing up in Arizona and as an Arizona native, it was only natural to take Spanish as my second language in both high school and college. In Mexico, I told the guys, despite how many of them spoke English, that I really wanted to work on my Spanish while I was there, and I was in their country. I respect their customs and courtesies and wanted to extend that. I found it really funny that in this rain and ice and in all the adrenaline, that when I squeezed off that trigger on day 2 at that buck at a little over 500 yards, although I was certain in my mind I saw it go down, I hadn't heard what my guides had said or how they had reacted or how the videographer had reacted. And for some reason, the only thing that came to mind was, ¿Qué pasó?
Dumped them hard.
See?
Dumped.
¿Verdad?
It's beautiful. It's right there.
Hunted Coues deer 30 years. George said keep an eye on these little cracks when we come around this corner. You guys have seen me on the show a lot. I don't get rattled. There's a very special place in my heart for Coues deer. A very special place in my heart for those that hunt them. And this guy right here, these two guys, They're the best. And to be able to hunt with these guys is a privilege, to be able to see a deer like that. We knew as soon as we saw him he was big. I don't know how big, but I've never seen anything like him. Good angle of inclination, right at 30 power, right at 500 yards, best of the West, 300 Win Mag. Unbelievable. So grateful, so blessed. So for all these years, nearly 2 decades guiding Coues deer hunters, one of my favorite moments is watching their reaction when they walk up to their giant Coues deer buck, and the respect that they now have for the animal as a first-time hunter or even a repeat client, to see their continuous level of love and admiration for the Coues deer. But this was a little different. This was my turn. This was my first approach on a 100-inch plus deer. And as we made the approach from the back end, I saw the mass, and I was actually overwhelmed. I get goosebumps even remembering it now. I was overwhelmed by the frame. And I just kept telling the guys, look at the frame, look at the frame. I don't care what he scores, look at that frame. And when I put hands on him, it took my breath away. A giant Sonoran Coues.
Oh my gosh. This is one of the smallest bodied Coues with the biggest cheek. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. George. George. Man, we did it.
We did.
Oh my gosh, guys.
It's a big buck.
Oh my gosh.
With the palmation, nice.
Oh my gosh, get up here, man. This is as much yours as it is mine. Gracias. Oh my gosh.
This is what you come from Mexico for.
This is what you come to Mexico for. This is
right.
unbelievable. Blading, mass, dark horns. Unbelievable.
Looks like you got another taxidermy job.
We got another taxidermy job. Thanks to you, George. This is awesome. This has been about 6 years in the making that Pat and George have been telling me to come hunt with them here. And I waited 6 years too long, let me tell you. Dark body, chocolate horns, just incredible. This is an insane deer. Look at what they got. You got your eye guard, nice and heavy. You don't always get that on a Coues deer. And off your main beam, you've got I think you can see it from that angle. You know, his point here is this, you know, legitimate point, and then you got a cheater here. You got a no kidding kicker. A lot of times in the woods you'll hear us talk about a kicker compared to a point. That's what I would call a kicker. It just juts out from the side, doesn't even point off. It kind of peters out or just ends like a kicker. And then, man, it just blades. All this mass stays, and then it just blades. And it's really pretty. I'll show you the other side. It just totally blades. And then the blading action continues on his other side, his left, but it keeps the mass almost the start of a drop tine. 3, 4, just a beautiful, beautiful. This is, if you ever saw a character deer, here it is, especially in a Coues deer, man. We saw this thing at 500 yards, and we knew we needed to shoot this deer. He's one of the most incredible deer I've ever seen.
Character buck.
Oh man, is he ever. Oh gosh, he looks even better on this side. Thank you, Lord.
Those are small, short faces.
Yeah. I've been rubbing on some trees today. A lot of greenery.
Dark.
Shoot.
The Best of the West is brought to you by the Wild Sheep Foundation, Cryptek Camo, Hawkins Precision, Polestar Outdoors, Hornady, accurate, deadly, dependable, Huskama Optics, and LongRangeStore.com.
Guys, I have hunted Coues deer for 30 years. I've never taken a deer anywhere near this caliber, size, or especially character. What a humbling moment. And of all the people in the world I could do it with, I'm so glad I got to do it with George and Ernie, Pat on the other side of the hill, and T. What an awesome day. We still got like 3 days to go. Best of the West, 300 win, 5x30 at 500 yards. It thumped him. George called the range, had the wind dialed in. The gun did the rest. Best of the West.
This week on our Coues deer hunt, I killed my 20th buck over 100 inches. And I have Dan to thank for that. He glassed it up for me.
After putting my own tag on my first Sonora giant Coues deer, my first buck over 100, in fact this buck scored closer to 110, I got the opportunity to do something I've always dreamed about. George had guided me, and now I was going to be able to take George and help him find his 24th buck over 100 inches. That truly makes him, in my mind and heart, the #1 Coues deer hunter of all time. So he had helped me yesterday do something special. Now I was put in a position where I could do something special for him in return. The weather had finally given us that break we needed, and while there were still some high clouds, the temperature remained cold, and you knew it was going to be one of those really special rut days. So we were glassing a canyon from a different vantage point than a day before, and all of a sudden at the tips of the grass, I just saw something standing out. At first I wanted to just say, Coues deer, Coues deer, Coues deer, but you want to be right. So I stared and I stared and I stared, and I was able to decipher it was in fact a bedded Coues deer. I showed it to George. He was able to get his spotting scope on it and confirm it was a buck well over 100 inches, and it was a buck he wanted to take. So we snuck down the ridge where we actually lost sight of the buck. We snuck our way up to the top of the ridge where we had to get down on our hands and knees, backpacks behind us, pulling him ahead, because we knew if he had even one glimpse that something was out of place, he'd be gone. He was still there, bedded down. The doe got up after about 15 minutes and started feeding. We were prepared for that buck to stand up once the doe went over the ridge. We got George set up on the rifle. He had the wind, he had the range, he had a rest, and he could comfortably and easily squeeze that trigger. It's the peak of the rut, so we knew the moment that doe went over the hill, this buck was going to become agitated and defensive. After maybe 30 seconds, maybe 60 seconds of that doe going out of sight from him and us, the ears started twitching, his head started going side to side, the tail started twitching. George was behind the gun and ready. When he stands up, you've got to be ready. We checked with T, we checked the wind, we triple checked the range one last time, and sure enough, the buck stood up. He's up, George. He's up. Spotter ready. When he stands up, you've got to be ready. We checked with T, we checked the wind, we triple checked the range one last time, and sure enough, the buck stood up. He's up, George. He's up. Spotter ready. Booyah. Beautiful shot, George. Just go ahead and rack it, but I don't think he's going anywhere. Nice shot.
Can you see him?
Oh, he just dropped. You crunched him. How you like that trigger?
He's saying, say something.
Bueno, bueno, bueno. The beast is dead. Long live the beast.
Tell him, ¿qué pasó?
¿Qué pasó? Did we get it? ¿Qué pasó? Did we hit it?
Thank you.
What a shot, George. Man, you just anchored him right where he was bedded. Just under 400 yards, about 6 mile an hour wind.
Oh, baby. Look at that shot. Perfect. Woo. Oh my gosh.
It's pretty.
Beautiful. That's an old deer.
Very nice.
The red and the gray and the black. Big body, 5-6-year-old deer he's been rubbing.
That was a lot of fun.
What a trophy. What a great shot. Put that right in the money spot, man. Quartering
Thank you, Dan.
towards almost 400 yards and just in his tracks over. we're getting ready to set up on the shot, and I said, "How you doing?" You know, kind of my guide instincts kick in, and he says, "I'm all right, I've done this before." Then he looks over at me and smiles. He goes, "But I still get excited." I was like, "Yeah, me too. This is awesome." Great buck.
It was a big deal to me that I was able to glass up this buck that George ultimately took, and to see a man like him put his hand on that deer, see the level of respect for the animal, respect for a higher power, and love and adoration for the hunt that George feels. It was a big deal to then be able to grab one side of the antler and walk that deer 800 yards back to the side-by-sides. It was a moment that I will never forget, and for George, just one of his 20-something odd deer over 100 inches that I know means a lot to him. Congratulations, George. I'm glad to be your business partner, but more importantly, I'm glad to be your friend. So one of the dynamics in our hunting camp was that unfortunately one of the other hunters that had booked this hunt was unable to come. And shortly after George tagged his buck around the campfire that night, he mentioned the opportunity that I could purchase a second tag if I wanted to. I thought long and hard about it, and I said, man, I'm already here, I'm having the best time, I've killed an incredible deer, and if I don't harvest another one, then I don't have to punch that ticket and write a check, I guess, so why not? Let's go try and get another Sonora Giant. The next day we went out, we kind of went through the same drive we'd gone a couple of days before, through these incredible draws, these incredible valleys. You can see why mountain lions would be successfully thriving here as well as Coues deer. Just beautiful, beautiful habitat. And as we were coming up over a ridge and a beautiful Sonoran sunrise, we got a glimpse of a buck, huge framed deer, running a doe off the edge. And we knew it was a buck worth looking at, and besides, we were at our spot anyways. It was time to get to work and set up our optics and start looking for deer. Not just this deer, but any deer. The weather is blown out. We have clear sunny skies. It's cold, which is what you want for the rut. The sun just came up. We've already seen a few deer moving around. I'm very excited to see what the back half of this hunt's going to offer for the entire Best of the West team. What a beautiful, beautiful place. After a short period of time, we started picking up bucks that we all kind of wanted to get a look at, and as we glassed these bucks over more and more, we thought, you know, we probably shouldn't pursue any of these bucks till we got another look at this first buck. So we decided to take the side-by-side down the ridge, kind of go along the wash, around the riverbed, and prop back up on the back side. The walk itself, as far as the distance, was probably a half a mile or less, but there was a huge amount of verticality during the first part of the climb. It put us up on a high spot where it would make glassing possible, but because of the sun positioning, not only was it difficult, but it was very uncomfortable. After a few minutes of glassing, I picked up just the back end of a white-tailed deer with that telltale white flag. I didn't know if it was the buck or the doe, but at least I knew I had a deer. And with the extra sunlight, it was worth calling the team over to help me glass. After a few minutes, the deer moved, and it turned out it was the doe. But we had hoped that was the same doe we saw push over the ridge with that monster buck that we so desperately wanted to get a look at. After a couple minutes, Pat just saw the tips off this buck and said, there he is. And I said, is that him? And he said, it's definitely him. Just under 400 yards, a little bit of right to left wind. Got set up on the tripod, got set up on the Flatline Ops bag, and then when I looked through the scope, no matter what magnification, there was just too much sunlight. And we confirmed it was definitely the buck that we had seen, definitely a shooter, definitely the buck we wanted. But we also knew we had some real dynamics playing against us. For one, the sun was in my face as the shooter. A second problem was that the sun was also directly into the camera light. And a third problem was the buck was so deep in the shadows and so deep in the vegetation, he only gave us very small windows. Now, in all my years in hunting television, I've never taken anything other than a broadside shot. But we discussed it as a team, and when this buck started following the doe down the ridge, all he presented to me was a quartering on shot at just under 400 yards. And I know that I trust my equipment, and I knew that if I gave it a good trigger squeeze, the bullet would fly true.
him solid. You got him solid.
Did I hit him?
Yes, he's down. Yeah, you're gonna kind of far back, but you broke him down.
Is he gonna need another one?
No.
Yes! Man, I had the hardest time.
Yeah, that's not easy.
I just went and took that shot
Perfect.
because
Perfect. Hey, brother.
normally I wouldn't take him front on.
Okay, Dan, that's yours.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh, man. Thank you. Oh my gosh, oh, look at the cheater by his eye.
I don't see it.
Águila. Hicimos otra vez. Gracias a ustedes.
How much to me? No, dude, especially with you guys. I will.
All right, brother. All right, man.
You happy?
Oh my god.
Congratulations. Get out, man. Get on the point.
Come on.
You know that map.
Oh my gosh, look at all this
You
crap.
couldn't have hit him. That guard, man, he was shooting. You gotta take him out.
He's got big scars up here, man. What a deer. Thank you guys. This is what it's like to be in the shadow of greatness. This is the culmination of an amazing week, not only professionally and personally, but for the friendship. And even more important than the friendship is the no kidding spiritual connection I think all of us have to this amazing Coues deer. They're a fierce animal, delicate to the appearance, but they live in some of the most inhospitable habitats you could imagine. And to think in 5 days, George and I could take bucks like this, it's very fulfilling in the heart and soul and minds, and obviously he's gonna be beautiful in the trophy room. Ernesto, Francisco, Pat, George, an amazing operation. Can't be more honored to be in business with you guys and to call you my friends and Coues deer mentors.